there, just an example. It's an extreme example, I think, but I think it makes the point.
And these are things that absolutely inform your collecting, like the purpose of what you're doing.
It does. And we'll get to my feelings about that with artists as well a little bit later in the talk as well.
So do you want to talk about this protest?
So, and I hated that for this, the image on the left is actually Tyler Perry, one of his movies that I superimposed the blackface on. And I was feeling so strongly about this that I tried to organize a protest when one of his movies came out. It's unfortunate he serves as a poster child of this because I think there's plenty to spread around. But again, to me, it's just about the balance that exists. So Tyler Perry, in my opinion, should continue making those movies. To me, and in my opinion, those images are negative. But I would like a balance, so we can make movies about other things as well as continuing the Medea series. So I organized a protest, and these are some of the images as well that I think over time continue to reinforce these things in our community that aren't necessarily positive to me.
And so the images in this slide include film stills. You got Big Mama's House with Martin Lawrence. You've got Tyler Perry as Medea, and then in the upper right corner, you've got Little John, a rapper.
So in that thought process of this positivity that kind of influenced my buying patterns, like I said. So this piece of work is by Walter Ellison, and it's basically his depiction of a race riot or a slave revolt. And again, seeing images like this for me initially when I started collecting, it really affected me. And it almost made me feel like along the Lane Locke lines, like the purses that I made should be those purses that kind of are uplifting or show very strong positive images of the community.
And so, and also our conversation, as we talked earlier about the title of the talk, race is always a big issue when we're talking about African American art and whether or not non-Black folks can appreciate it or not. And so this is from 30 Americans, which I'm sure most of you saw last year at the Corcoran in DC. And so there were audience responses. And so this is a response. And if you can't read it, it says, "I get so sick and tired of your racially motivated schemes. Let slavery go." And this person signed it. So it's this kind of negative response to this show that wasn't necessarily about race. It just happened to be a show with Black artists. So, Darryl.
So yeah, when I saw this comment, I just took a photograph of it because it stunned, well, not surprised me. But I do think that, and even for me, the issue of race, it's almost like I have race exhaustion. Meaning, I think that as a whole, sometimes all of us get sick and tired of talking about it. I mean, why do we have to keep bringing this issue up? Why does it keep coming as a problem? But unfortunately, it's still a problem. So we still have to talk about it. And when I saw this comment by the person, it really made me wonder. So when she saw, for example, Glenn Ligon's works, that were just completely abstract, but may have issues of race narrated in them, but underneath. So when you see those works superficially, what makes those works seem like they're related to slavery? And so it's just really interesting to me how other cultures automatically view these works as racially motivated. Now, some obviously were, like Gary Simmons' Duck Duck Goose, which is a very, very strong, in-your-face kind of piece that involved, for those who didn't see him, they actually had KKK hoods with the noose hanging in the center of the piece. But so many other works in that show weren't directly referencing race that I found this to be just an off-putting kind of comment to make. So, likewise, though, sometimes, again, with my sensibilities, I purchase art that does kind of reflect it. But this is an interesting piece that shows how it doesn't have to be so overtly done. This is by a photographer named Demetrius Oliver. And when I first saw it, it was just grotesque, but to me also stunningly beautiful. He just covered his face in chocolate. But the piece is called Till, in reference to Emmett Till. And so now that piece really has extreme weight, extreme weight. It's just, to me, a stunning, clever way to present the history of this young man who was mangled beyond belief, and his mother who had the courage to have an open casket so the world could see what was done to her child. And likewise, the piece of art is the one on the right by Theaster Gates. So he was given fire hoses that were going to be discarded by the Chicago Fire Department, and he made a frame and put them behind a glass and called it In Case of a Race Riot, which I just think is really clever. So that you break the glass so that you could spray the people like on the picture on the left. This piece is by Radcliffe Bailey. And again, when I first saw it, actually the photograph doesn't really do it justice. It's on paper, but it's really, there's glitter, sand glitter all over it. It really is amazing how it shines. But the piece is called the Door of No Return. And that photograph that's inset is just taken out from the slave castles off the coast of Ghana. So I think these three examples are how work can have racial meanings on them, but yet kind of coded. And I think these artists have done a good job of doing that. This work is by Jefferson Penders, and it's called Ghetto Wall. He basically has taken used tin and metal parts that actually has been degraded to make this wall, or just almost door. And oftentimes we think about the ghetto as areas that are kind of cordoned off from the rest of us. And we found that actually that cordoning off or separating of people doesn't work very well. It doesn't kind of, for their long-term well-being, it might not be the best way to do it, to separate people from the rest of the population. And those communities often degrade. But this is my interpretation. So his use of degrading materials on this door is kind of in concert with that.
And let's talk a little bit about your relationship with some of the artists, like Theaster Gates or Leonardo Drew and Jefferson. As a collector of contemporary art, you're getting to know the artists. How do you navigate that relationship with not just collecting their work, but having friendships?
I guess it's funny you said, Jeffreen, as we were driving up today, that I was born maybe 30 or 40 years too late. And I guess I have an old spirit. But so when I read in the past how during the Harlem Renaissance, there were all these relationships, all these artists used to go over one another's house. The collectors would be there, and you would have the musicians all together. It was kind of a community. And inside me, I really like to go back to that. It's a little more difficult these days, I think, because artists, they're almost like rock stars, kind of. And sometimes it can be kind of hard because they can't meet every single person. I mean, they have lives as well. But I've been relatively fortunate to develop some relationships with some of the artists I collect. And I think that's in part due to I think they can feel my sincerity when I meet them. But I think it really helps me in terms of the investment I have in terms of being philanthropic, because I understand that they have lives that need supporting, And likewise, I get this, it's certainly a symbiotic relationship, because what the art does for me, in terms of looking at it in my house, in terms of just beautification of the world, I mean, everything besides these kind of artworks. Art is about ergonomics. It's about how things are designed. It's such a part of our life that gets enhanced by these persons that I feel very fortunate to meet them. So a little more reading, I'm sorry. So here's another quote by Lorna Simpson, and it says, "My question is, why does working with a black figure necessarily mean that the work loses a universal quality?" And so as I put these images up that I've presented, it's interesting that, and I'm going to make another reference to, there was an article written about an exhibition out in LA now called Now Dig This. And I think Kenneth Johnson was the author of the article, a critic from the New York Times. And I'm kind of paraphrasing him. The exhibition is about black artists from the LA area that made art during the Watch riots in the 60s. And Mr. Johnson he said that in order for you to identify with the work, you had to be black or be experienced or go through what these artists go through, which to me is grossly inaccurate. Because when I look at a piece of artwork, like for example, when I look at the Robert Motherwell piece out there, I didn't in my head think about what color, what Motherwell is. The first thing that I think about is it aesthetically pleasing to me? And that's irrespective of whatever color the artist is. So if I see work in a museum that has black figures in it, how all of a sudden does that now get cordoned off into this subset now called black art? They just happen to be black figures. And I find that that's what's happening, even in terms of me being a collector. I think that my collection and the collection of African American art is being dismissed, or it's more dismissive than something else. So I really want the universal quality of artwork produced by blacks to be in concert with all of the works. I saw Curator James Marshall lecture the other day, and what struck me is he said that I want to open competition. It's almost like baseball when there were no Negro players in the baseball. The baseball couldn't be the best quality playing because you didn't have all the players available. Curator James Marshall said he wanted the opportunity to compete head to head. Let's see who has the best work. So I just think it's really important to kind of dispel this notion that if artwork is done by blacks or has black things in it, then somehow now it gets pushed to the side where it's now a certain subset. And I don't think that's done with other forms. For example, if there was the Asian Art Festival, it wouldn't get the same dismissive nature to it. In that same kind of vein, the Smithsonian American Museum had an exhibition called The Art of Video Games. Now, I'm not a curator, and I'm still a very young collector in terms of collecting art, and certainly wouldn't be presumptuous to tell what the Smithsonian American Museum to do. But I do find it odd that there's an exhibition. This exhibition was mounted with a whole T-shirts and cards and stuff that you could buy about video games, but that there are other outstanding artists of different persuasions who still haven't had shows in major museums. So these shows about video games are given a greater significance than Grafton Tyler Brown or Huey Lee Smith. And I just find that interesting.
So, talk about the Norman Lewis in your collection, as well as your interactions with Sharon.
Yeah, so this is a piece by Norman Lewis called Blue Cloud, and I was fortunate enough to meet his daughter in New York. Norman Lewis was right there with the greatest abstract expressionists And when I met his daughter,